Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from A Man Talks FPL SC. In today's video, we're going through a Game Week 12 Wildcard Draft. I understand during the international break, quite a few players out there will be on their wildcard. Hopefully this video is useful in terms of having some ideas about players that I'm thinking about bringing in that I think you should all consider. And for those who are not on wildcard, hopefully the video is still useful, in terms of players that I talk about as good transfer targets that we can look to bring into the team in the next few weeks. So if you guys enjoy it, really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing as well to the channel if you do enjoy the content, but let's get straight into it. So I'll just show the team from the very beginning, and what we will get into a little bit later is some of the picks that I had to think about a little bit harder. I'll show some underlying data and statistics just to kind of, give you my reasoning and as to why I went with those players. There are a few players in this draft that I think really don't need to be discussed that much. I would include basically the defenders in Trent, Reece James, Cancelo, Ben Foster on the bench there, Mo Salah. I think those are all kind of locks basically because they're all, Salah is just an amazing option. Those are the three probably best defenders I think to go for in my opinion. I mean, you could go Chilwell over James. James actually ranks first in terms of expected goal involvement for all defenders, even better than the likes of Trent and Cancelo. So from an underlying stats basis, his numbers are a lot better. And in the past few weeks, he's outperformed Chilwell as well. So I definitely would probably favour Reece James as well in comparison to Chilwell, but you could very easily go for Chilwell instead. But I think having Trent, Cancelo, and then one of James and Chilwell, or potentially both, I haven't gone for that in this particular draft, I think is going to be a great way to go. I'll also include Livramento as one of those players that you don't really need to discuss too much. He is now going up to 4.5 million, so if you haven't actually got in Livramento up until this point, there could be an argument to not go for him because there are cheaper options like Ben White, Tariq Lamptey, who are cheaper than him and playing as well. But if you've got the value tied up in him, there's no real reason, I think, to drop Livramento. He's got some attacking upside, so he's a perfect kind of bench placeholder for us there. There are definitely some options here that I think are going to be a little bit more debating. So the goalkeeper is one. Quite a few of the midfielders, they do look quite good on paper, but I still think there's some decisions to be made there. And the forward line as well, because we know that the forwards, there hasn't been that many good options. So I think there's definitely a few positions that I've had to think about a little bit more in terms of player selections, others less so. So looking ahead to the midfield, we've got Son, Jota, Foden, Gallagher paired with Salah. Son I'm pretty confident with in terms of that Spurs selection. I do think he offers better value than Harry Kane. Yes, Harry Kane does act as that kind of placeholder for Ronaldo in the future, but I think Son and Kane have been posting pretty similar underlying stats, and for that £2 million saving, I think Son is probably the way to go. I mean, you could argue that there are more midfield options than say the forwards, so if you have Harry Kane, it takes one of those slots. Therefore, instead of going for Son, you can go for another cheaper option like a Smith Rowe, for example. But I think Son just overall offers better value, and I think on a player versus player debate, I would opt with him. So I'm going for Son for those next few fixtures for Spurs, which are looking really good. Jota, this is taking advantage of the fact that Firmino has been injured, and so we expect for the next few weeks that Jota will be nailed on to start for Liverpool, and we know that Liverpool are the best attacking team in the league so far based on underlying stats and also goals scored. Jota himself always posts great underlying stats, so I don't really think we need to think too much about having him. If I was on a wild card, I definitely would be having him in there, and I'm also strongly thinking about bringing him in even if I'm not on a wild card. Foden and Gallagher, I mean, Gallagher's shown again in the past couple of weeks that he was, at the beginning of the season, he was posting very, very good numbers, getting the good FPL points. Then he kind of went on a bit of a drought. But we've seen now the past couple of weeks, he's gone back to back with double-digit returns. Crystal Palace's fixtures especially have really, really improved. And I think that's one of the key indicators as to why a lot of people are looking to go for Gallagher. Potential thing I have thought about is Eze, if he comes back into that Crystal Palace team, how is that going to affect Gallagher? But I think Gallagher's pretty nailed on. He might not be as advanced potentially, but he does seem to have a knack for getting into the right places at the right time. So I think at 5.8 million, he is the second highest point scoring midfielder. So I think he's going to be an overall great option with their good fixtures coming up. And Foden, similar thing. We did also see him get a big double-digit return recently. He hasn't quite hit the heights of that yet, but he is still posting good underlying stats, and he looks pretty cemented into Manchester City's strongest starting 11. And so I think that's a really good sign for 8 million to get a Manchester City attacker, especially when he's playing at the false nine. He did actually get shifted out to the left in the last game for Man City, which isn't as good of a sign, but I still think that Foden is posting good underlying stats, and I think he should be a good selection on the wild card. Antonio and Wilson. So Antonio does have tough fixtures coming up, but I don't think there are that many other good forward options, and we know that from game week 16, West Ham have got great fixtures. West Ham themselves are a good attacking team, so I've really got no reservation around picking Antonio. He's been one of the best performing forwards so far for FPL, so I'm more than happy to stick with him on a wild card. Callum Wilson, a bit of a differential here, mainly based on the fixtures because Newcastle have got a great month ahead. He always posts decent underlying stats, and he just seems to tick along nicely, so I do like Wilson as a bit of a differential. And finally, looking at the back there we've actually decided to not go with Aaron Ramsdale. We've gone with Guaita instead from Crystal Palace because Crystal Palace's long-term fixtures are very good and they're posting amazing defensive stats, which we'll get into shortly as well. And now looking at the bench there, Ben Foster and Livramento, as I mentioned, are pretty locked in. There's not real much debate about that. I have decided to go for a bench fodder third striker option in Keenan Davis at 4.4 million. The way that the game is being played out at the moment, we're seeing more value in the kind of midfielders and defenders. So I think there's not as much of a reason to go for your, more money up top. Obviously, we need to be flexible and keep in back in my mind that we are going to want guys like Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the future, because from game week 18, I think it is, that Everton do have some good fixtures over the Christmas period. Ronaldo obviously is going to be someone to keep in mind for sure, but I do think that we can get away with having that third striker spot not be relevant at this point in time in the season. And Reguilon, I've actually got as my fourth defender. Be a hybrid 4-4-2. It could be a 3-5-2 depending on when you want to bench Reguilon. I think we're just coming into a period of time where we're going to see more rotation, especially in that kind of Christmas period. So I don't think it's that bad of an idea having a good, strong first bench option and then having Livramento to supplement that as well. I think having the two playing bench options is going to be probably about just good enough, and so we don't really need to rely on the third bench spot, I think, that often. So I'm happy enough to have Keenan Davis be there instead. So overall, I do like the squad. It would probably be primarily this kind of 3-5-2, but we can also shift into that 4-4-2 or even a 4-5-1, but depending on the fixtures. So that's the team. I won't spend too much more time talking about that. We'll kind of go through some of the stats that, made me choose certain players. And, obviously there's going to be a lot of players that I did miss out. So hopefully my reasoning now will help you get some insight into why I went a certain direction. So the first kind of debate I had when making the wildcard was the goalkeeper. And really I was decided between Ramsdale and Guaita. I do have Ramsdale in my own personal team, and since I'm not on a wildcard, I probably won't be changing him. If I was on a wildcard though, I would be tempted to shift to Guaita instead, because as you can see there, in terms of team expected goals conceded, Crystal Palace have been second in the league so far. They've had some of the toughest fixtures to begin the season, so they've been looking really, really solid at the back. And you can see there, their next 10, I'm looking a little bit more long-term with a goalkeeper, because you're not going to really be making too many changes in that position. You can see that it's mainly green. There's not too many red fixtures. They have got Manchester United away and then Liverpool at home. Aside from that, they do have like a West Ham, but really most of those games there are pretty good. And with those good underlying defensive numbers, I do think that Crystal Palace defense is worthwhile considering. None of their defenders are really that attacking, so I think covering it off instead with Guaita, the goalkeeper, who does make quite a few saves. You can see there 2.82 saves per 90 minutes, so he is averaging around an extra save point per game. An interesting stat to highlight there is the PSXG. Basically, that just means per shot XG conceded. That basically just reflects how good of a shot stopper is that goalkeeper in terms of preventing the XG that they were conceding. I know it's a little bit convoluted. Basically, what it shows here is that Ramsdale has been really, really good in his shot stopping ability in terms of that he's a positive 0.27. Guaita not so much, minus 0.28, but he has faced better opposition who potentially, more clinical, for example. So there could be some variance in that regard. So I do think Guaita is a good consideration. He is 0.1 cheaper than Ramsdale, and as you can see, looking at Ramsdale's fixtures, he has benefited from some good ones, but he is coming into a slightly tougher period with the likes of Liverpool, Manchester United. Man City is a little bit further down the line. You can't really go too wrong with either of the two, but on this particular wildcard, I have gone with Guaita. Next section with these defenders, Trent, James, and Cancelo. As I mentioned, I don't think there really needs to be too much of a discussion. I just kind of wanted to show the stats just to highlight why I'm so comfortable picking the three of them. Basically, these three post amazing underlying attacking stats for a defender. You can see Reece James there. He's actually got the highest expected goal involvement per 90 minutes of any defender, and then Trent follows him. Cancelo doesn't actually rank as high, but we just recently saw he got 2 assists in one game. He has already got 4 assists so far this season. He does typically actually seem to underperform his underlying data, but I think when you're playing for a Manchester City defense, who are the best defense in the league, I think with that attacking upside, you can't really go without Cancelo, and in my opinion, these three are probably the 3 best premium defenders to go for. Now, in terms of that 4th defender spot, I was debating whether to put in Emerson Royal or Sergio Reguilon in terms of covering off that Tottenham defender, because I do think it might be worthwhile going for a Tottenham defender on a wildcard, because with Conte coming in, I would expect them to hopefully be a little bit stronger at the back. They're actually about mid-table so far in terms of expected goals conceded, so they're not awful defensively, and I think Conte should improve it. And I think you're probably going to look to go for one of the wing backs, because we know that wing backs traditionally perform very well in a Conte back 3. So there's not too much in terms of price difference between Royal and Reguilon. There's 0.1 million in it. You can see there though that Reguilon has done a lot better on a points per appearance basis. But I will note that that was inflated due to him playing the first 3 games where Tottenham did get their 3 clean sheets, whereas Royal's first game was in game week 4, and that's basically when they started conceding. So I wouldn't read too much into the points per appearance. Mainly just focus on the kind of underlying XGI. It's not too different between the pair of them, and it's nothing amazing. We just saw Trent, Reece James, and Cancelo all above 0.25, and Trent and Reece James is above 0.5. These guys at 0.06 and 0.13 respectively. Reguilon has got the 2 assists, but I did want to look at the heat map because I think with this new system we want to kind of see how far forward do they get. The top heat map is Royals and the bottom heat map is Reguilon's. Looking at the heat map, it actually it's quite interesting in that Royal actually seems like he cuts into the box just a tad more than Reguilon. I'd say Royal's actually getting a little bit further forward as well, so it is pretty interesting to note. He hasn't got the attacking stats, but maybe you could go for that more differential option in Royal if you think that, based on looking at that heat map, playing in that wing-back system, he is more likely to get the assists. I just think Reguilon is a bit of a safer pick. At right wing-back, I have heard on a previous podcast from James at Planet FPL, who's a massive Tottenham fan and very, very knowledgeable about his football. He thinks potentially there could be some time where Lucas Moura maybe plays at that right wing-back spot, although Reguilon may be a little bit more nailed on. So I've just paid that extra 0.1 to go for Reguilon. I think they're both probably going to be equally getting attacking stats. I don't think there's going to be too much of a difference between them. I think it could just potentially be, if you need to save 0.1, I think going for Royal is perfectly fine, but I think the more safer option is Reguilon, and that's what I've gone for in this case. So next up, looking at those kind of premium and the mid-range midfielders, Son, don't really need to speak about him too much more. I think he's already got 6 returns so far this season. We saw that when Spurs weren't even doing that well. He does typically tick along, and I do like that he does have that potential to get very easy double-digit returns when he only gets like 1 single goal, because he does have that benefit of getting a clean sheet, and he's very good on the underlying bonus point system as well. And you can see that the next 6 for Spurs are really strong: Leeds, Burnley, Brentford and Norwich, and then Brighton and Leicester. Leicester have only kept the 1 clean sheet, I think, so far this season, so I don't even think that's particularly bad of a fixture. And you guys know me, I really like Son as an FPL option, so for me he had to be in the wildcard draft. Similar with Jota, I think the fact that he is a bit more nailed on, those underlying stats are amazing that you can see there: 0.56 expected goals per 90 minutes and 0.32. I will caveat with he doesn't normally play the full 90 minutes, so you're not going to really get the full benefit of those kind of underlying stats, but you can see that he does get in the right positions, does post good stats, so he is a very good option playing for the best attacking team. And Foden's stats are very, very good himself. 0.47 XG per 90 minutes. That suggests 1 goal every 2 games, which I think is a return that you would happily take for a kind of £8 million midfielder. And really good fixtures for Man City moving forward as well. Everton, West Ham is a bit tougher, but then you've got Villa, Watford, Wolves and Leeds. There's some great fixtures moving forward for Man City, so I really wanted to get a Man City attacker in there, and I think Phil Foden is probably the best option to go for there. Now, in terms of filling out that final budget midfielder spot, I was debating between Gallagher and Smith Rowe. Even Mbeumo was still in my thoughts because Brentford still do have some good fixtures up until around game week 16, and his underlying stats are pretty good as well. I think we've probably just been a little bit disappointed by how they performed. Maybe in hindsight, after maybe they smash Newcastle and they get a lot of goals, we might rethink that budget midfielder slot. But I think, again, I chose the next 10 for the budget midfielder because I don't think you're going to be swapping that position around as much maybe as your kind of higher valued players. So looking at the next 10, as I highlighted with Guaita, Crystal Palace's long-term fixtures are very good, and Gallagher's underlying stats are very good as well. Good assist potential with a 0.34 expected assists per 90 minutes and decent goal threat. He's already got the 8 returns as well so far this season. I think Gallagher's a great option. And Smith Rowe, I mean, God, what a journey. I started with Smith Rowe and I actually was liking what I was seeing in terms of he was getting in the right positions, but for whatever reason I got sucked into the XG, and so I went with Mbeumo instead of my wildcard. And since I've sold Smith Rowe, he's been absolutely amazing. Really, really good for Arsenal, which I'm happy to see as an Arsenal fan, to see him doing well. But I sold him when he was at 5.4 million, and now he's gone up to 5.8, and he's got like 3 goals in his last 3 games. So, hindsight, but I think Smith Rowe could still be a good budget option. The reason I haven't gone with him and I've instead gone with Gallagher is just in the next few fixtures, Gallagher's are a little bit better. You can see that Arsenal have got Liverpool, Manchester United away, Everton away, not as easy fixtures. They've got West Ham there, you can see as well, compared to Crystal Palace. So that's why I've opted to go for Gallagher in this one. But I think you could equally make an argument to go for both of these as well, actually. Take money out of, say, either a Foden or a Jota, and you could use that spare money to upgrade that third striker spot, or even upgrade your 4th defender up to like a Ben Chilwell. And so finally, looking at the forwards, again, there wasn't too many players that I did consider here. I mean, I did briefly think about Kane, but I think Son is probably the better option. I'd even thought about keeping Vardy, but then I thought about it more, and that with the extra rotation that might happen, fixture congestion, Vardy a little bit older, I thought maybe he might not play the full games. He had recently got those injury issues as well, whereas I know with Callum Wilson and Antonio, if they're fit, they're going to be playing the full 90 minutes. I mean, it's a big if because Wilson and Antonio both have had their respective injury issues. But Wilson, the pick is mainly based on fixtures because we really want to target the next 4, Brentford, Arsenal, Norwich and Burnley. It's those 3 home fixtures against Brentford, Norwich and Burnley that you really want to target. Wilson is someone I do quite have an affinity for, I think, for FPL purposes. I started with him last season and he just ticks along very nicely, just seems to pick up goals. He's on penalties, which is really nice as well. And I think he is probably the only option I'd consider out of Newcastle, and they probably do have potentially that, new manager bounce. He has previously played under Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, and they were a lot more of an attacking team under him. And so we could see that new manager bounce, good fixtures, a more attacking philosophy. I think that spells good news for Wilson. So I really want to have Wilson there on the wild card. Antonio, great underlying stats. We've already seen him get 10 attacking returns so far this season. In the short term, not good fixtures. You can see there Man City, Brighton and Chelsea are coming up. But after that, you're really going to want, your West Ham attackers. And I think Antonio is the best one to go for because they've got Burnley, Arsenal, Norwich, Southampton, and even beyond that, really, really good fixtures. So Antonio, I think, is definitely someone I still wanted to keep on the wildcard. You could potentially drop down to Tony instead. Maybe keep the money in the bank, ride Tony out for his better fixtures and then make the switch. But for me, I thought it'd be easier just to remove the headache and just stick solid with Antonio from the beginning. And so we'll circle back. Here's the team again, just for reference. I wanted to show at the beginning and I wanted to show it at the end, as we did have a bit of an intermission talking about some different stuff as well. That's the wildcard draft that I would go for. It has 0.0 in the bank as well. This is based on my team value, so you guys could be able to afford a little bit more. You could be able to afford a little bit less potentially. If that was the case, most likely I would take the money out of Reguilon and I would drop that down to like a £4.5 million defender because we still have some good playing options in that category. This is probably the direction that I'd want to take my own team in. I mean, guys like Jota, Foden, Gallagher, Son, they're all players that I really, really want. Callum Wilson as well. So don't be surprised that, in next week's team selection and in future transfer moves, I'm looking to target players like this. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully some content over the international break just to kill the boredom just a little bit. So if you enjoyed it, really appreciate a thumbs up. Do please consider subscribing as always, but I'll see you all in the next video.